everybody, and thank you for joining us here today. My name is Tony Carroll, and I am the South Carolina State Manager and Chief Training Officer here at Security Title Corporation of Baltimore. And I'm going to be moderating today's webinar. But before we get started, we've got a few housekeeping items. You are in listen-only mode, but feel free to ask any questions and comments through the questions box on the GoToWebinar panel that should be located on your right side. If that panel does happen to be in your way, you can hit the button in the right corner of that panel and make it bigger or smaller. That's to the left of the X. We are going to address any questions you have. We have a lot of content to share here today, and we will address all of your questions at the end of the webinar. And today we are super excited to have Matt Reese, one of my very good friends, a longtime industry friend, join us. He's the EVP of Strategic Partner Relationships for Rynoh today. Matt and I said, do we just go way back? And Matt joined Rynoh back in 2015. And as I said, he's the Executive Vice President, along with being an ALTA and TP, a national title professional, which is on my horizon. I'll make that happen one day. Matt is also a former licensed underwriter. He's active in the American Land Title, ALTA. Matt currently sits on both the Government Affairs Committee and Membership and Organization Committees. And prior to Rynoh, for 13 years, Matt worked for a Virginia-based title and settlement agency, Reliant Title. He also served on the Virginia Land Title Board of Directors as the Director of Events. Introduced nationally at February 2009, Rynoh is a patent financial management and fraud prevention system specifically designed for today's diligent title agent. And Matt also graduated from the University of Virginia. So we're super excited to have him here. He's got some great information to share with you. We've got a lot of fraud going on in our industry, and we can talk about some ways that we can help that. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate you carving out some time for us here today and look forward to what you have to say.
Well, thank you, Tony. I certainly appreciate the glowing introduction, and to your point, longtime industry friend, really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and all of your friends here today. So we have, like she said, like Tony said, we've got a lot to unpack in a short amount of time. To quote Smokey and the Bandit, we got a long way to go and a short time to get there. So without further ado, just to kind of give you an outline of what we want to cover in the 30 minutes we have today. I've got a bunch of different graphs, a bunch of different charts, particularly from IC3, the Internet Crime Complaint Center from the FBI, and then another study that I really like outside of the title industry, the AFP, the Association for Financial Professionals. A lot of really good charts and graphs that show just the, what we all know about, the growing, continued threat vector, all the challenges that we're all faced with. From there, I will segue into just continuing discussions around, threats, obviously the external pressure that we're feeling, but also, there are internal threats that you as organizations should be monitoring. From there, we'll go back in time. We'll go back and quickly talk about ALTA's best practices, specifically Pillar 2, which speaks to escrow security and hygiene. So without all the shock and awe, what can we learn? What can we take away? So we'll talk about some prevention techniques that you could implement within your organizations, relatively low cost, some even no cost solutions. Then we'll save some time to do a very quick, very high-level brief introduction. I will actually walk you through a demo of Rynoh. And then once that's all done, as time allows, and I certainly have more time beyond the 30 minutes, but if there are any questions to be addressed, as Tony mentioned, certainly want to get to those while I have your attention. So as Tony mentioned, a little bit about Rynoh. Rynoh was actually born out of my family's title agency. The concept of Rynoh really actually goes back to 2003, so 20 years ago. We went into the marketplace in 2007. To date, we have a little over 2,600 title company or settlement agents, title companies, real estate attorneys throughout the United States, all 50 states, which represents about a 38 to 40% overall market share. We see 38 to 40% of all real estate closings each and every day. which equates to about 23 million closings in the life of Rhino, which is about $7.2 trillion. These are all statistics we're rather proud of, and how we've helped protect and maintain the health of this beautiful industry that I've called home for 20 years. So let's talk about the threats. As I mentioned, one of my favorite reports, as you see noted at the bottom, the Association for Financial Professionals, the AFP, they put out an annual quote unquote payments, fraud, and control survey report each and every year. And what's interesting to note, these are not just isolated to the title industry. You know, we are not the only ones subject to financial fraud and threats. You know, that's, I guess, good, bad, or indifferent, you know, knowing that, hey, it's not just isolated to real estate. You can see there's an interesting trend. You know, it kind of bottomed out in 2012, 2013, and there was a pretty steady uptick up until 18, 19. We're somewhat on the downslide of actual attempts and fraud. As we get further into these slides, into the presentation, though the percentage of attempts is declining, when we get to one of the IC3 charts, it is counterintuitive to this as far as the actual lost dollars. So while we may sit here and think that the threats are going down, the losses are not, and that's something that we definitely want to pay attention to. So from IC3, from the FBI, the number of complaints, you can see from 16, 17, and 18 were relatively moderate, and then 19 and beyond, it's kind of been a nice rocket ship, or a sad rocket ship to the top. Actual numbers of complaints, it's softened a little bit from 21 to 22, but let's be realistic. The last 3 years being at or near 800,000 complaints is a significant amount. So though we have seen a downturn from 21 to 22, as mentioned, the dollars have not acquiesced. They continue to grow. These figures are in billions, B with a boy, B as in boy. So you can see early on, 2016, 17, even 18, slow and steady wins the race. But then in 2020 to 21 to 22, it has been a rather vertical growth. Last year, 2020, in the most recent IC3 report, clearing $10 billion in actual losses. That is a lot of money. So to my point a minute ago, while we are seeing a downturn in complaints, the dollars are continuing to grow. Something I think we all need to pay close attention to. The threats are still very real. They're still very actual. So to kind of break it down a little bit, from the IC3, where are most of the threats coming from? I think by now, throughout the industry, hopefully most, if not all of you, are sadly aware that most of it is phishing attempts through a variety of business email compromise, BEC type activity. While it has dropped, you can see over the last 5 years, 21 was the high water mark. It dropped a little bit in 22, but yet again, from the previous slide, the actual losses were still significant. And then there's a variety of other smaller, though non-de minimis, we can't dismiss, data breaches and extortion and so forth. But obviously, the big target on the back really gets back to phishing attempts. And I don't mean rod and reel. Think about all the emails that you and your organization and your staff get each and every day. And the techniques, it's not just the good old days of the Nigerian prince schemes that we all know and love. It's gotten increasingly more sophisticated with their vocabulary, with their language, and so forth. So talking about actual dollars, that $10 billion, the previous year, the $6.9 billion. Interestingly here, for the last 3 to 5 years, BEC was the front runner, was head and shoulders above all the other actual losses. For the first time in quite some time, BEC is second place. Their investment has kind of jumped ahead, but BEC is right on its heels, and it has been consistently, gold medal winner, now silver medal for quite some time, and then a variety of other losses for a while. Confidence fraud was number 2 for several years, and they've dropped all the way down to 5th based on the IC3 reports. But in all this, even though investment fraud, investment losses is number 1, within our industry, within the title and settlement industry, BEC still continues to be a massive challenge. Wire fraud and so forth. So beyond all that, reverting back to the AFP, the Payments Fraud and Control Survey, while we all talk about BEC, while we all talk about wire fraud, and you can see that sits nice and neat as number 3 in the bronze medal spot. What we cannot lose sight of, while we're all talking about, look over here and talk about wire fraud, sadly, we still also need to focus on check fraud. That continues to be a problem. Obviously, the dollar figures are not nearly as significant, but the actual number of attempts and where there's most vulnerability, we still have to worry about check fraud. And we're gonna dig into that a little bit more here on some of the next slides. But unfortunately, it's like a hydra. We've got multiple heads coming at us all at one time. And just because you cut one head off doesn't mean you kill the beast. You really have to focus on all of them, sadly. So I know in these challenging times, in the tough market that we're in, we still have to worry about fraud on multiple fronts. Hate to be the bearer of bad news, but sadly that is quite true. So at the beginning, I mentioned, going through some charts, going through some statistics. We have the external threats, which I'll continue to talk on here in a second. But within your own organizations, what are you doing to safeguard the escrowed funds that to which you are fiduciarily responsible? When I on wearing my sales hat for Rhino, one of the first questions I usually ask people, prospective clients of ours, do you reconcile your accounts every single day? Do you do it once a week? Do you do it once a month? Obviously, I'm of the opinion you really need to be doing it every single day. You can ill afford to wait to find out a month later, oh gosh, that payoff hasn't cleared, the real estate taxes haven't been filed, that document hasn't been recorded because the clerk check hasn't been cashed. And that's frankly why Rhino was born out of our family's agency 20 years ago, when we were doing it manual, we were doing it monthly. My father and I used to come in on the weekends, the first weekend of the following month when we got our bank statements, only to find out that there was an IRS payoff that hadn't been cashed from the month prior. And it had been almost 5 weeks now that it was still outstanding. And long story short, it cost our family, it cost our agency over $30,000 in penalties, interest, legal fees to fight the IRS. And ultimately, we as the settlement agent, having that fiduciary responsibility, guess what? The money came out of our pocket. So I cannot implore enough why you really need to be looking at your escrow accounts more than once a month. Additionally, changes in payee, if you've remitted a tax payment, but the mortgage company who was escrowing those funds for the borrower got there first, you're getting refunds back from the city treasurer's office. Literally the very first client we ever had. As I mentioned, Rhino, quote unquote, started in 2007. The very first client we ever had was a local law firm here in my market. I live in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Literally day one on the job, first client ever, ground zero. The most senior paralegal, most trusted employee had been taking those stale checks that were coming back from the city treasurer's offices and putting them in a drawer, and nobody called on them after 3 to 6 months. She was repurposing them to herself. She was changing the payee within the system. Nobody was the wiser. After some time, she had siphoned over $153,000 from the law firm's escrow accounts. So again, it's the old saying, trust but verify. You really need to have safeguards in place that no one single person has complete autonomy and control of the escrow process. And then of course, negative balances, incorrect amounts. Obviously in today's market, history tends to repeat itself. If any of us have been in this industry, Tony and I hate to we started working when we were 10 in the title industry.
Mhm.
But right, Tony?
Yeah.
But going back to when I first started it, when I got into the family business in 02, 21 years ago, I lived through 07, 08, 09, that market crash. And here we are again, history repeating itself 15, 16 years later. We saw a rash of defalcations back then. We had gone through, the 2004, 5, 6, 7, the run up. Market conditions were all-time highs back then, similar to the COVID surge. And then all of a sudden the rug gets pulled out from us. Everybody was used to a certain standard of living. Escrow accounts still have nice balances. There are stale funds sitting there, and people get sticky fingers. So of course, the conversations I continue to have with auditors, with underwriters, getting those stale monies off escrow account books, because they tend to somehow find a new home when they shouldn't. External threats, obviously we talked about, business email compromise as reported by IC3, wire fraud we're aware of, check fraud I showed you based on the AFP report. One thing, if you're not doing it, I would yet again, please, please, please implore, if your bank offers positive pay, please, without exception, utilize that service. I know sometimes it's an additional cost, but that peace of mind is, you cannot replace that peace of mind.
I don't think you could say that loud enough, Matt. I just had an agent, a friend of mine, that had their checks washed, and they were being repurposed. So, I don't think we can stress that enough.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that anecdote. I'm sorry they dealt with that. If your bank doesn't offer positive pay, I'm probably going to get a lot of nasty emails from some bankers. You probably need to think about moving to a bank that does offer positive pay. Most banks by now should be offering positive pay. When we first started using positive pay within our agency back in 2003, it was not a common practice. We actually switched banks at that time 20 years ago because the bank we were using didn't offer it, and we believed in it so much that we moved our banking relationship. I would just add one other thing. If you are looking at positive pay, I would also ask the question, and you can see in parentheses here, with payee match. And the reason I say that, positive pay is based primarily on two criteria with the checks you issue. It's based on the dollar amount and the check number. So you could have check 101 for 150 bucks payable to Tony Carroll. Well, if slick old Matt Reese gets his hands on it and takes her name off of it, it's still check 101, it's still 150 bucks, but I put my name on it. The bank may offer it based on those two criteria, but if you have the third leg of the tripod, if you've got the payee name verification, the payee match, they're looking for Tony Carroll's name. They're not looking for Matt Reese. So if your bank does offer positive pay, please ask the question with payee match. So just, please keep that in mind. We used positive pay within our own agency. Like I said, when we started building Ryno, Ryno synced with our bank to submit our positive pay file, so it saved us a tremendous amount of time. This gentleman's face you see here, I'll talk a little bit more about him at the very end. He's a guy by the name of Frank Abagnale. So just kind of keep that name in the back of your mind. So, talking about the threats, talking about some of the external, internal concerns, obviously going back, gosh, Tony, best practices was 11, 12 years ago, right? 2011, yeah. 2012. God,
yeah.
It's been a while. Specifically with ALTA's pillar number 2, it talks about adopt, and this is straight from the document, adopt and maintain appropriate written procedures and controls for escrow trust accounts, allowing for, and I emphasize electronic verification of reconciliation. And why is that important? What is electronic verification? So here you see at the bottom, if any of you have traveled internationally and TSA, and they scan your passports, and all that information is archived in an electronic database. We'll take that same idea, take that same notion, and apply it to your reconciliations. For an auditor to come in and they're going to want to see your reconciliations and bank statements, and you present to them paper documents of that, it's really not getting to the source of the data. And I'll provide one more anecdote to that. If anybody is from Georgia, many years ago, there was a pretty significant defalcation case, land castle title, a gentleman by the name of Nat Hardwick absconded. It was an inside job. He and I think like their finance director were, it was a two-person job, and they absconded. That's a polite word of saying internal embezzlement or defalcation, somewhere in the neighborhood of like 30, maybe 40 million, not billion, $1 million. And it left their underwriters on the hooks to make whole those funds. As the story goes, one of the underwriter auditors noticed on a bank statement that one digit looked a little, shall we say, wonky. And they had digitally doctored the bank statement and presented paper copies during an audit. And I don't know if they took a 0 and made it look like an 8, but it was literally one digit was off. And it brought the whole house of cards down. They had been doing it for years. Nat Hardwick, I believe he's off in prison, hopefully by now. But the long story short is
he is.
He is? Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Tony, you're very familiar with this then. Yeah.
Yes.
It's if you're not familiar with it, look it up. It's a very significant defalcation case. And, the underwriters, they had multiple underwriters. They were not doing their audits, through electronic verification. They were just being presented paper documents. Really, if you're getting the data straight from the source, from the bank is the system of record, and you can't doctor the electronic, reporting. So some, internal controls, external controls that we'll talk about. Again, obviously, I'm a big advocate. I'm a big proponent for daily 3-way reconciliation. I can't implore that enough. Complying with ULTA's Pillar 2, talking about segregation of duties, that law firm that we talked about, where that one paralegal had complete autonomy to do everything, prepare and sign off on the reconciliations. I will tell you again, back in the market crash of 2007, 2008, our little family title agency, we went from 30 employees doing over 300 closings a month down to 2, me and a processor. We maintained segregation of duties. My processor prepared the recs, I signed off on them. Simply trust but verify. So if you are even an organization of 2 people, it can be done. I promise you that. Secure email, obviously complying with Pillar 3, please definitely do that. Employee background checks, hopefully that's something you're doing at least when you hire your staff, if not doing it, preferably once a year, once every couple of years. That first law firm from 2007, conditions change, financial circumstances change. I know staff may think, why are they doing this? But you can ill afford to lose money. So make sure you're doing background checks on your staff. Critical, additional internal controls, some other things, if we talk about good funds requirements, just because you have a check in hand doesn't mean it's irrevocably deposited to your escrow account. Just again, speaking from personal experience, our internal guideline within our title company, when we had one, we would take a personal check up to somewhere between $500 to $1,000, and it's really all about risk mitigation. How far are you willing to stick out your neck? $500 to $1,000. Yeah, if I lose that, it stings. It's not fun, but I can replace that. I could hopefully have enough in my operating account to cover that loss, and then do what I need to do. Beyond that, what's your threshold for a cashier's check? Ours was $10,000 back in the day. I will tell you, when I did a purchase closing at one point, I was presented with what was purported a cashier's check, deposited it to the escrow account. A week later, that cashier's check was returned by our bank. It was a duped, fraudulent check, a cashier's check. And as I said, it was a family business. My father was my boss. I won't use the exact colorful language he used, but he held me accountable for that. We called the realtor, an agent with whom I had done a lot of business throughout the years. We tried to track down the buyer. They bought the house. It was primary residence. They supposedly moved in. The buyer was non-responsive. They didn't return any phone calls, emails. We sent a certified letter. We filed a judgment, a warning debt, a judgment against the property as a lien. So you'd think, yeah, we are in second lien position behind the purchase money deed of trust. Well, as luck would have it, 2 years later, the buyer foreclosed on the property. Our judgment got wiped out. We never saw the money. So what is your threshold for a cashier's check? And then I know we have grave concerns about wires, but that's the best and surest way of making sure that that money is irrevocably credited, deposited to your escrow account. So, and there are certain states such as like Ohio and a few others that already have good funds guidelines implemented as a state requirement. If you're in a state that doesn't have good funds guidelines, I would still implement some level of process of policies and procedures, just as internal safeguards. Like I said, we did it. It wasn't required here in Virginia, but we just did it for ourselves. So I know we're getting short on time. So one thing I do want to talk about is a quick intro to Rhino. So hang with me here while I bring it up.
While you do that, I just want to remind everybody to put any questions you may have in the questions box, and we'll address those shortly.
So Rhino, as I said, was built in 2007-ish. Well, it really started in 2003. Took a few years to fine tune. We are a cloud-based technology. You can be anywhere, anytime, knowing the health and well-being of your escrow account. We are what you call a bridge application software. We connect between your production software, RamQuest, ResWare, SoftPro. We integrate with about 19 or 20 of the industry software, and we connect to the bank. So we're seeing both sides of the equation. We are the bridge, spanning the gap, providing daily automated communication between the two. We provide you as a user with a daily summary report. You have the ability to log in. So when I used to use Rhino in my family's agency, I would actually log in each morning before driving to the office to see the health and the stability. We had 4 escrow accounts, so I knew 2 were good, 2 were bad. Why are they bad? I can click on it. When we talk about daily reconciliation, how are you looking at outstanding funds, payments that haven't been cleared? We talked about that as one of your internal threats. So Rhino's going to be looking back in your software, for instance, at a mortgage payoff that perhaps hasn't cleared after 4 days. So we see it issued out of your software, the clock is ticking, 4 days has passed. That payoff hasn't been cashed. We don't see it clearing the bank. We're going to tell you about it. We're going to be that quote unquote, automated escrow accounting assistant sitting on your shoulders each and every day. It's so easy. Watch this. I'm going to click add recommended alerts. Here are a bunch of other criteria. I always talk about a penny. Everybody deals with those little nefarious recording overages, those 2, those 5, those $10 refunds that people never borrow. So what's your comfort level? You can customize it. Is it 90 days? Is it 180 days? Recording checks, realtor commissions. Well, we know this is a demo account because no realtor would ever go 2 weeks without cashing their check. I somewhat kid. I'm a real estate agent on the side as well. So I'm picking on myself. So now we've added all those criteria, as you can see here. Then we get into the daily reporting, all the comprehensive daily reports, the reconciliation reports. You also have monthly reports that obviously will make that process very easy for your auditors, for Tony and her team, when they have to come in to do their annual reviews. Here's a summary of what that report looks like. The intention ideally is every day, do I have a proper 3-way reconciliation, not a 2-way, not just between the bank and the book. The critical piece is your trial balance. Each and every individual closing must stand on its own 2 legs. In one of those slides, one of the internal threats are negative balances. We would call those out for you. You would know if there is a file that is short, how much and how long. Here's a bad version, red unbalanced bank book trial. We're telling you where the bodies are buried. You thought you sent this wire out. We see it posted in your software, but we don't see it clearing the bank. We had an issue where a title company thought they had wired a payoff 2 weeks prior. Our first day on the job, we told them it wasn't out. It was still in their software. It never left the bank. It was over a $10 million. It was a commercial deal. It was over $10 million. After 2 weeks, daily interest was about $40,000 that they had to cover. They would have known about it the very next day had they been on Rhino sooner. Negative balances, so on and so forth. Those time-sensitive criteria, Rhino tracks payoffs after 4 days. There's the penny after 90. You know about this stuff every single day. If you're using positive pay, great, I applaud you. One of the tools that Rhino can do is we can automate those daily uploads from your software to the bank. It's one less thing you have to worry about. Like I said, when I used Rhino, we did use positive pay with our bank. Rhino sent our check files from our software to the bank 4 times a day for us, all automatically. 10 a.m., noon, 2 p.m., close of business. There's plenty more that we can go through. I know we're at the top of the 30 minutes. So Tony, I figured I'll just kind of jump back to the presentation and, just spotlight Rhino. As I mentioned, Frank Abagnale, in 2003, my father went to the American Land Title Association. They had one of their annual conferences. Frank Abagnale was the keynote speaker 20 years ago. He was on stage imploring the importance of positive pay. So Tony, thank you for the plug. Abagnale was talking about this 20 years ago. My dad had never heard of positive pay. The industry was not talking about positive pay. And as we know, technology, yes. I'm sorry, go ahead, Tony.
No, I agree. If you even watch this movie Catch Me If You Can, it's a great movie. Just kind of puts it in perspective.
Absolutely, yep. So Tom Hanks played the federal agent. Leonardo DiCaprio played Frank Abagnale. It's so I know we are at the top, and I certainly want to save some time for some Q&A. So Tony, do we want to open up the floor?
Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions come in quite yet. This is amazing, Matt. I mean, great job. This is something that's super important in our industry right now, and it makes reconciliation so much easier. It's done in minutes. You get in the morning. I've used Rhino before in a past life. I come in the morning and I've got reports telling me what didn't clear, what cleared, if there is a issue, with the check. The positive pay really just helps protect you, especially in this world that everybody is getting a lot more creative with on the fraud side of things.
Yep.
Not seeing questions, and I know we're out of time for now. What I can do is pass any questions that our agents have on. They can reach out to our state managers or to us directly. Matt, your last slide there, you've got your contact information. Matt is readily available, or you can reach out to Rhino. Yep. Is there some, we've got your contact information. Is there any additional info that they need for today?
No, I mean, if you want, you're certainly welcome to share those 2 reports that I emailed you. Also that little 1-page brochure. I mean, to do a full demo of Rhino, it would take 30 to 45 minutes. I tried to condense it to 5. So, if there are any questions, if anybody wants to talk about some of the market conditions and fraud and threats and so forth, I geek out and love to talk about that stuff all day long. So that's, I guess, the nerd in me. But certainly feel free
and
to
you're integrated with you're integrated with the majority of the title production systems.
I mean, the question always comes up. The one outlier, unfortunately, is Qualia. They refuse to integrate with us. So if you're on Qualia, I do apologize. That would not work. But SoftPro, RamQuest, Resware, Title Express, eClosing, Closer's Choice, AccuTitle, LandTech, Close It. I mean, I could keep going. For the most part.
And they can use it right from your website too. They don't necessarily have to have an integration.
Well, for Rhino to work, behind the scenes, we will connect our piece of software into their software environment, into their SoftPro, into their Resware, into their RamQuest. And then once we have that software connection behind the scenes, once we connect to their banking, that's kind of the hamster in the wheel. That's the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, pulling all the strings so that the reports can then be provided. But when people think new software, they tend to think, oh, this is going to be 6 months. It's going to be painful and arduous. Our average onboarding time is anywhere from 2 to less than 4 weeks. We can have you up and running pretty quick, and it all runs on autopilot behind the scenes. And there's really not a lot to learn because, we're doing all this stuff behind the scenes while you're doing what you normally do every day.
Look, come on, no hands.
Right? Yeah, you're right. That's a good analogy.
As far as pricing and everything, we can have them reach out to you directly on that.
It's all based on closings. So I know, closings are a little down these days. So our bill would be down. We are like a utility bill. We bill backwards. We bill in arrears the first of the following month. So for instance, August 1st, all of our clients get their July bills for however many closings files we monitored, we reconciled on their behalf, just like a utility bill. There is no contract. If you don't like us, if you think I sold you a bill of goods, you can fire us tomorrow. We do not believe in locking you in on a 6 or 12-month agreement. It is, we call it month to month, but really it's day to day that we bill you month to month.
Perfect. Well, we are out of time. We appreciate everybody for staying over a little bit because this is really a super important subject. So please join us next month, Thursday, August 10:30, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central. We will have Angela Says of Capital Bank join us. I know she's going to talk about streamlining your banking needs and minimizing your risk as well. She's in a bunch of states that we do business in and does have positive pay. So
Yep.
it's going to be another great one.
They're a great bank. Angela's a great banker. They have a great positive pay solution, so I would definitely recommend them.
Awesome, awesome. Matt, I can't thank you enough for joining us here today, and look forward to catching up with you soon. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Have a great day.